In a Las Vegas courtroom, two teenage boys sat just yards away from the family of the man they killed. Instead of hanging their heads in shame, they smirked, joked, and mocked. What you're watching isn't an act of defiance from hardened criminals. These are kids who filmed a murder for entertainment and brought that same arrogance into court. This is the story of Jesus Ayala and Zamir Keys, two teens whose crime spree ended with a retired police chief dead and a community demanding justice. The question wasn't whether they were guilty. The evidence was overwhelming. The question was whether the system would let their age be an excuse. For a moment, no one looks at the judge. All eyes are on the woman clutching a framed photo of her husband, on the daughter staring straight ahead, refusing to cry in front of the boys who laughed when he died. Jesus leans back, jaw tight, eyes scanning the gallery like this is background noise. Zamir keeps his hands laced together, elbows on the table, but when he thinks no one is watching, the corner of his mouth curls. That same smirk witnesses say he had in the video. Their lawyers say they're young, impulsive, raised in chaos. They talk about broken homes, brain development, and a world where reckless stunts get likes faster than empathy ever will. They tell the court this was stupidity behind the wheel, a tragedy that grew out of boredom, not hatred. For a moment, the court has drowned in words, but then the lights dim. A monitor flickers to life. The judge warns the gallery about what they're about to see. On the screen, you don't see transcripts or police reports. You see through their eyes. You're in the passenger seat. You hear teenagers laughing as a cyclist appears up ahead in the bike lane. You hear one of them talk about hitting him like it's a joke. You watch the car drift, line up, and lunge. There is no way to look at that and pretend this was just a mistake. No way to call it a simple accident when the last thing recorded before a man's body hits the pavement is laughter. The few seconds of video where the evidence starts speaking louder than their age, louder than the excuses, louder than anything anyone can say in this courtroom. And once you've watched it, you can't unsee it. If stories like this help you understand how fast a normal day can turn into a tragedy, you can subscribe and stay with us as we walk through the real cases behind the headlines. Before he was a headline, he was just Dad. The man in the cycling helmet on that Las Vegas street wasn't some anonymous victim. He was the steady center of a family, the kind of person people called when something went wrong because he always seemed to know what to do. Andreas Probst spent more than 35 years in law enforcement, working his way up to become chief of police in Bell, California, a city in the Los Angeles area. Former colleagues and family describe him as a man of honor and integrity, the kind of officer who knew his community by name, not by report number. He retired in 2009, moved to Las Vegas with his wife Crystal, and shifted to a remote job in security consulting. Retirement didn't mean slowing down. It meant more time for bikes, family, and the simple routines he loved. He was a little league dad, and, as his daughter put it, like being next to a ray of sunshine, always the one offering advice, encouragement, or a bad joke when you needed it. Cycling was his reset button. Neighbors saw him ride often in the early mornings before the heat really hit the asphalt. It was predictable in the best possible way. Same general route, same reflective gear, same quiet comfort in movement. He and Crystal were approaching their 35th wedding anniversary. They had plans, family trips, more rides, more years of ordinary days. His daughter later told reporters that her father embraced everyone and that he was the one in the family who always seemed steady, even when the world wasn't. That's the man who didn't come home from a bike ride on August 14th. Before they were sitting at a defense table in shackles, they were just names on school rosters and group chats. Teenagers in oversized hoodies scrolling through the same feeds as millions of other kids. But somewhere between jokes, dares, and stolen cars, the line between content and crime disappeared. Jesus Ayala grew up in Las Vegas, part of a generation that came of age with viral challenges and social media holding up the worst impulses for likes and views. By the summer of 2023, local law enforcement already knew his name. Court records show he faced separate charges in a June 2023 stabbing case: attempted murder, battery, and attempted robbery, even before the fatal hit and run. He was 17 at the time of Probst's death, old enough under Nevada law to be automatically moved into the adult system once charged with murder. Reports from later hearings described conflicting medical opinions about his mental state, including concerns about possible brain damage and competency to stand trial, leading a judge in 2024 to temporarily send him to a psychiatric facility for evaluation. Zamir Keys was 16 that summer. Less is publicly known about his family life, but in court he told the judge his highest completed grade was 11th. He too was swept from the juvenile world into adult court. In the eyes of the law, he wasn't the kid with the phone. He was a co-defendant in a murder case, accused of laughing, recording, and egging on a killing. Classmates and neighbors later described typical teen scenes: video games, hanging out, talking about cars and money. Nothing about their social media profiles in those early months said future homicide defendants. The line between dumb risk and catastrophic crime is often invisible until someone crosses it. This story isn't about two lifelong villains. It's about two teenagers whose choices on one morning made them the face of something many people found even more frightening than random violence: the idea that a human life could become a punchline on camera. Unlike many cases where victim and defendant have history, Andreas Probst did not know Jesus Ayala or Zamir Keys. There were no feuds, no arguments, no years of resentment. Their only connection is a stretch of northwest Las Vegas road and the fact that they happened to be there at the same time. The relationships that mattered most that morning were inside the car. You had a driver and a passenger. You had a stolen vehicle. You had a phone recording. According to prosecutors, Ayala and Keys had already made at least one deliberate decision to use that car as a weapon. Earlier that morning, a 72-year-old cyclist called 911, saying a car just ran me over on my bicycle and insisting it was on purpose. He survived with non-life-threatening injuries, but the pattern was already starting. Later, they allegedly struck another car, a Toyota Corolla, then kept going. By the time their paths crossed with Probst, the teens were not simply joyriding, prosecutors say. They were in the middle of what law enforcement later called a crime spree of stolen cars and intentional hit-and-runs, all of it narrated and filmed on a phone that would eventually become Exhibit A. Just before dawn, August 14, 2023. Northwest Las Vegas, sometime around 5:20 a.m., a 72-year-old man rides his bicycle along a Las Vegas street. A car approaches from behind and, according to his later 911 call, deliberately runs him over. At 5:27 a.m., he calls emergency services, telling the operator, "He ran me over on purpose. I got as far to the right as I could." He is treated on scene. He survives. A little later, another driver in a Toyota Corolla is hit. The driver suffers non-life-threatening injuries. The car that hit them speeds away. At the same time, Andreas Probst is waking up in his home nearby. It's another Monday. He gears up for a morning ride. Helmet, bike, maybe a check of his Apple Watch. For him, this is routine. A ride before the heat, before emails, before the day really begins. Around 6:00 a.m., Probst is riding northbound along North Tenaya Way, near West Centennial Parkway, in a marked bike lane. Behind him, the stolen Hyundai Elantra moves through the neighborhood. Inside, the teen's morning has turned into a kind of game. Phone out. Recording. They've already hit one cyclist, already struck one car. The camera captures them laughing, talking, and aiming that 2-ton machine at whatever is in front of them. What Andreas Probst expects from this ride is the same thing he's gotten from dozens of others: a bit of exercise, a clear mind, and a safe return home. What's actually coming is a car he never sees. There's no face-to-face argument in this case. No words traded on a sidewalk. The confrontation is one-sided and moving at 40 miles per hour. From the passenger seat camera, you see the road ahead. The teens have already filmed themselves clipping another car, laughing as they drive off. Then the camera shifts and catches a cyclist in the distance, riding in the bike lane, doing exactly what he's supposed to do. One voice, prosecutors say it's Ayala, asks something like, "Ready?" Another voice, attributed to Keys, answers, "Yeah, it is A." There's no sign that Probst knows they're there. He's not turning around, not yelling, not bracing for impact. The only visible tension is inside the car, the decision to turn a casual, joking sentence into physical action. On the road, the Hyundai drifts slightly to the left, then suddenly swerves right, straight into the bike lane. From the camera's perspective, the Hyundai closes the distance quickly. For a fraction of a second, the cyclist's figure fills more of the frame. He's riding in a straight line, just ahead of the car. Then the car lunges. The impact isn't shown in graphic detail, but you see enough. The Hyundai hits Probst from behind. His body is thrown up onto the hood, then over the windshield. The car doesn't brake. It doesn't swerve away after clipping him. It drives through him. A bicycle is no match for a 2-ton vehicle. Witnesses later describe seeing Probst lying in the road, his helmet and personal items scattered. His phone one place, his bike another. Inside the car, there's laughter. The passenger turns the camera back inside for a second, then toward the back window, where the cyclist is now a motionless figure on the asphalt. There is no sign of panic, no immediate move to stop and help. The weapon in this case isn't a knife or a gun. It's a stolen car pointed at a man who never even had a chance to raise his hands. The first call about Probst's crash comes in at around 6:03 a.m. A woman tells 911 that a man has been hit by a car outside her apartment and that she thinks he might be dead. 2 minutes later, at 6:05 a.m., technology adds its own call for help. Probst's Apple Watch automatically alerts emergency services that its wearer has taken a hard fall and isn't responding. It sends coordinates, helping dispatchers narrow down the exact location. Police and paramedics arrive to a scene that doesn't look survivable. His bike is twisted and separated from him. His helmet is far from his body. Years in law enforcement tell some of the responders exactly how bad this is the moment they see it. He is rushed to University Medical Center in Las Vegas. Despite efforts to save him, Andreas Andy Probst is pronounced dead that morning. For his family, the notification isn't a phone call from an officer at their door. It starts with an alert on a daughter's phone, telling her that her father's watch has detected a hard fall. By the time they reach the scene, they can see enough to know that life has just split into before and after. On the street, clues are piling up fast. Around 6:13 a.m., another 911 caller reports a car flying down the road, only on 3 wheels, almost crashing through an intersection. At 6:17 a.m., a parent driving children to school sees a damaged vehicle abandoned, still running. Its windshield smashed and its front end torn up. Like they hit someone, he tells 911. The car is a Hyundai Elantra, reported stolen. That alone would be enough to start a serious investigation. But within days, Las Vegas police get something even more damning. The video from inside the car. It begins circulating among students at a local high school, reportedly airdropped phone to phone and shared on social media. Someone finally sends it to a local reporter who urges them to turn it over to the police. When detectives watch the clip, the case changes. What at first looked like a hit and run now looks like intentional homicide. The evidence chain grows quickly. The stolen Hyundai, abandoned with severe front-end damage and a shattered windshield. Witness statements and 911 calls about the earlier cyclist and the Corolla. The internal video showing the approach, the comments, the laughter, and the impact. Phone data and social media connections that help identify the teens in the video. Within weeks, Jesus Ayala and Zamir Keys are arrested. Under Nevada law, because they are 16 and 17 and charged with murder, they are moved into the adult system. The drivers in those videos are no longer anonymous voices on a clip. They're defendants, facing the possibility of spending most of their lives in prison. Prosecutors move quickly and aggressively. Ayala and Keys are charged with murder with use of a deadly weapon, the car, attempted murder for the earlier cyclist, battery with a deadly weapon for striking the Corolla driver and others, leaving the scene of a crash resulting in death, grand larceny of a motor vehicle and related auto theft counts. At their early hearings, both teens stand in court in jail uniforms, flanked by attorneys. Media later report that at one point they appeared to smirk and laugh, even gesturing toward Probst's family, behavior that led a judge to warn them about their courtroom conduct and fed public anger. Because of the seriousness of the charges and the clear evidence of flight and danger to the community, Both are ordered held without bail while the case moves forward. For Probst's family, that decision is one of the few early moments that feels like the system sees what they see. Not a traffic case, not a tragic accident, but a deliberate act with a stolen car. In the months that follow, the case becomes a tug-of-war between two narratives. Prosecution's case: this was not an accident. The internal video shows planning, not panic. The words before the crash and the laughter afterward point to intent. The teens were on a crime spree, already having hit another cyclist and a car, making this part of a pattern, not a one-time mistake. The car was a deadly weapon, used like any other. The choice to flee instead of call for help shows consciousness of guilt. They used the physical evidence: damage to the car, Probst's injuries, the prior 911 calls, along with the video and phone records to argue that this is second-degree murder at minimum, and potentially something even harsher if a jury is convinced of clear intent. Defense's case: both defendants were teenagers, with immature decision-making and brains still developing. One defendant, Ayala, was found incompetent to stand trial at one point, with doctors split on whether he understood the proceedings, suggesting mental health complexities and potential brain injury. They argue that the video shows recklessness and stupidity, horrific, tragic, indefensible, but not premeditation in the way a planned assassination would be. Defense attorneys also point to background factors: instability at home, prior trauma, peer pressure, and a culture online where dangerous stunts and violent clips are rewarded with views and attention. For a while, it looks like the case might go all the way to trial. But behind the scenes, something else is happening: plea negotiations. The turning point is the video itself. Jurors could watch it over and over again. No one can cross-examine a recording that shows your clients laughing moments before a man dies. Eventually, both sides reach a deal that keeps the teens in prison for decades, but avoids the gamble of a jury verdict. On October 7, 2025, Jesus Ayala, now 20, stands before District Judge Jacqueline Bluth and admits in open court that he intentionally struck Andreas Probst with a vehicle. He pleads guilty to second-degree murder with use of a deadly weapon, battery with a deadly weapon, robbery connected to the broader crime spree. As part of the agreement, he accepts a sentence of 20 years to life in prison. The judge says she plans to follow the negotiated terms. A week later, on October 14, 2025, Jezimir Keys, now 18, enters his own plea. He pleads guilty to second-degree murder with use of a deadly weapon, battery with a deadly weapon for striking other victims that morning. His deal calls for 18 years to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after the minimum term. The judge notes in court that his plea is tied to Ayala's. Both must accept responsibility for the agreement to stand. Both young men answer the judge's questions softly: "Yes, ma'am, I understand," and tell the court they've read their plea forms and know what they're agreeing to. They are no longer fighting the charges. They are asking the court to lock them up for a span of time that, in practical terms, covers much of their lives. Sentencing for both is scheduled for December 16, 2025. By the time sentencing day arrives, the courtroom is expected to be full again. Family, law enforcement, cyclists, reporters, and members of a community still grappling with what they saw on that video. Prosecutors are likely to argue for sentences at the high end of the agreed ranges, emphasizing the deliberate nature of the act, the fact that Probst was fully within his rights, riding in a marked lane, the earlier hit-and-runs that same morning, the need to send a message about using vehicles as weapons and treating violence as entertainment. Defense attorneys will push in the other direction, within the limits of the deals they've already accepted. They'll likely point to the defendant's ages at the time of the crime, mental health concerns, particularly in Ayala's case, their guilty pleas, which spared the Probst family a public trial, replaying the video in open court. At some point, the judge will probably turn to the defendants and ask if they want to speak. What they say, apologies, explanations, or silence, will be remembered by the family long after the courtroom empties. The most powerful voices, though, will belong to Andreas Probst's family. His wife may talk about waking up to an Apple Watch alert instead of a good morning kiss. His daughter may talk about the way he laughed, the way he showed up at Little League games, the way the house feels bigger and emptier without him. They may describe how it feels to watch your loved one's last moments play out on strangers' phones. Whatever number the judge says, 18 to life, 20 to life, one truth will sit heavy over the room. For the Probst family, there is no sentence that brings their husband and father back. At its core, this case is devastatingly simple. A man who spent his life trying to keep communities safe was killed while doing something as ordinary as riding his bike in a marked lane near his home. Two teenagers turned a stolen car and a smartphone into a weapon and a stage, and in a matter of seconds, everyone's lives changed. One family lost a husband and father. Two families are now visiting their sons through glass. A community has a permanent ghost bike by the side of the road. It raises hard questions that go beyond this one morning in Las Vegas. What happens when social media turns violence into content? How should the justice system handle teens who do adult-level harm? At what point does reckless become murder, especially when a car, not a gun, is the weapon? There's no tidy answer that makes everyone whole. What we're left with is a reminder of how fragile the line is between routine and catastrophe, and how a choice that takes 5 seconds can echo for decades. If stories like this help you see how thin that line is, and you want to follow more real cases where law, fear, and terrible decisions collide, you can stay with us, subscribe, and be here for the next story.